Welcome back, dear viewers, to another lesson on this educational channel for biology. We'll be studying Form 5 biology today, and it's on Chapter 3 entitled Coordination and Response. We'll be studying the three types of neurons. What are neurons? Neurons are nerve cells that are very specialized, and they transmit electrical impulses throughout the body. They carry information throughout the nervous system by using electrical and chemical signals. They are the oldest cells in the body, and many neurons will live our whole lifespan. After birth, should some of the neurons die, they will not be replaced except in certain parts of the brain, where they will be formed through neurogenesis. Apart from being the oldest cells, neurons are also the longest cells because they have extensions called axons, which can extend to a few feet in length. In this lesson, we'll be studying the three different types of neurons, their structures and their functions, and we'll make a comparison. And at the end, we will discuss an essay question on this topic. So let's begin. The learning outcomes for this lesson are as follows. We should be able to label the structure of an efferent neuron and identify the types of neuron from any diagrams given after this lesson. So let's study the structure of a neuron. A neuron is actually a nerve cell that carries information or messages in the form of a nerve impulse throughout the nervous system. A nerve impulse is a message in the form of an electrical signal that a neuron transmits or carries. So it is an electrical signal. Number 3, there are three types of neurons in the body. Afferent neuron, also called the sensory neuron. Now this is an old term, sensory neuron. In our syllabus, we are going to refer to it as afferent neuron. B, interneuron, or sometimes called the intermediate neuron. So we'll use this term, interneuron. And C, efferent neuron or motor neuron. But we'll use the term efferent neuron. So these terms in brackets are sometimes used. So we still have to remember what they stand for. So memorize the two terms. But when you are writing your answers for the structured or essay section, please use afferent neuron, interneuron, and efferent neuron. So the first one is afferent and the last one here is efferent. I want to stress this so that we can see the difference between them, or we can, when I refer to them, you understand which neuron I'm talking about. Actually they sound very alike, the two neurons, A and C. So afferent neuron and efferent neuron. A afferent, E efferent. Let us now discuss the structure of the efferent neuron, the third neuron that transmits impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors. Remember, efferent neuron is connected to the effectors like muscles or glands. And they bring the impulse out from the central nervous system to the effectors. So exit, E for exit also. So this is the neuron that we have to study more about, is the structure. We have to study the structure of the efferent neuron. Right, so the neuron looks like a hand, you see, the shape. This is like the palm, and these are like the fingers, and this is the arm, like a person's arm. So you have an idea of how it looks like for the structure of efferent neuron. For the other neurons, the structure is slightly different. So we'll study the other neurons after this. Now, in the neurons, there are three parts. The first part are the dendrites and dendrons that transmit impulses towards the cell body. So the dendrons are these parts that are thicker, and then they'll branch out to form the dendrites. Dendrons branch out to form the dendrites. So they transmit impulses towards the cell body, means the impulse must go only one way. That means from the dendrites to the dendrons, and then towards the cell body. This is called the cell body. So the second part of the neuron is the cell body. It's this part. Now cell body consists of the nucleus and the cytoplasm, and it contains the organelles just like the normal cells. Okay, this part is like the normal cells, has cytoplasm, nucleus, and organelles. And the last part is this long fiber below, which is the axon. So there's only one axon here, and then it branches out to form the axon ends. Okay, so axon transmits impulses away from the cell body. Okay, this is the cell body and transmits the impulses away from the cell body. So it's very different from the dendrites and dendrons here that transmit impulses towards the cell body. Okay, so here we show the transmission of impulses, the direction from the dendrites to the dendrons to the cell body, and then from the cell body to the axon. Okay, so if I ask to draw the arrow, it must always be from dendrites or dendrons here to cell body and then to the axon. Only one way, the flow of the impulse is only one direction. It cannot go upwards. You cannot go upwards instead. So it's very systematic. Okay, from the dendron to the cell body to the axon. Now, okay, the cell body consists of the nucleus and the cytoplasm. Okay, then the axon branches out a bit at the ends and then form the axon terminals, where there is like a swelling or a bulge here. Okay, and then the axon terminals are connected to the effectors. Okay, so the effector here is the muscle. It can also be a gland. And after the impulse reaches the effectors, then the effector will respond. For example, the muscle may contract. Now let's look at the axon. The axon is not just a projection sticking out. It has a sort of a coat around it called the myelin sheath. This myelin sheath is very important because it can speed up the impulse transmission or the transmission of impulses very much. Okay, so it is made up of a fatty substance that is white in color, whitish color, and it has gaps called the nodes of Ranvier. So why is it like that with gaps? You see, when the impulse starts to be transmitted through the axon, it will not go down the whole length of the axon in the center, but to be faster, it will jump from one node of Ranvier to the other. So at the node of Ranvier, there is a little bit of axon that can transmit the impulse. But the myelin sheath is made of fatty material or substance, so it will not transmit any impulses. It is an insulator. So it's done intentionally so that the impulse can jump from one node of Ranvier to the other, where there's a bit of axon there, and then it can travel faster so that the organism with this type of neurons can respond more quickly to any changes in the environment for the survival of the organism. Okay, so the faster the organism responds, the better. And the myelin sheath therefore has this function to speed up the impulse transmission or the transmission of nerve impulses. Okay, so that's a wonderful adaptation. So you can copy this diagram into your notebook, and through drawing it and labeling it, you'll be able to understand and remember the names of the structures better. These are the notes for what we discussed in the previous slide. So I'll just go through very quickly. The cell body of the neuron contains the cytoplasm and the nucleus. Dendrites and dendrons are thread-like extensions from the cell body, and the function is to carry the impulses towards the cell body. Okay, whereas axon is a long fiber projecting from the cell body, branches out at its tip to form the axon terminals or the ends of the axon. The swellings are called synaptic knobs, and the function is to carry impulses away from the cell body as compared to the dendrons that carry impulses towards the cell body. Myelin sheath is very important. It's an insulating membrane surrounding axon made up of fatty material, fatty substance. Okay, fatty substance. It has many nodes of Ranvier or gaps, and the function is as an impulse moves along the axon, it will jump from one node of Ranvier to the next and increase the speed at which the impulse travels. So this is important, the function of the myelin sheath. Now we'll also look at the other two types of neurons, which are the efferent neuron and the interneurons. Okay, we already studied this third one, efferent neuron, which transmits impulses to the effector. And think of the word efferent, effector, and exit. It transmits the impulses away from the central nervous system, from the brain and the spinal cord, towards the effector. Okay. Now, afferent neuron is the one that transmits the impulse towards the central nervous system. So it is connected to the receptors. As compared to the efferent neuron, it is connected to the effectors. Okay, so the receptor will detect the stimulus in the environment and then trigger a nerve impulse. And this impulse will then be transmitted by the afferent neuron to the central nervous system, like the spinal cord and the brain. The structure of the afferent neuron is very different from the efferent neuron, and you have to learn to identify the three types of neurons because their structure are different. Their structures are different. Now, for afferent neuron, the cell body is at the side of the whole structure. It's not at the end, no, like this for here. It's at the upper part, upper end of the cell for efferent neuron. The cell body is at the upper end. But for the afferent neuron, the cell body is at the side. Okay, not really at the middle. For afferent neuron, actually the dendron is longer. Okay, the dendron is longer than the axon. But never mind. We'll look at the length of these structures later on. Now, how do we label the afferent neuron, the dendron and axon? Always remember that the dendron transmits impulses towards the cell body. So this lower part here, we must determine the direction of flow of impulse first. If this is a receptor, that means the direction of impulse will be up this way, from receptor to the other end. So you draw this arrow going up. That means this part here, between the receptor and the cell body, is the dendron, which transmits impulses towards the cell body. And after that, the impulse is flowing away from the cell body, so this is the axon. Okay, so the lower part is the dendron, the upper part is the axon. Okay, be clear about that because of the direction of the arrow. The dendron will transmit the impulse towards the cell body, and the axon will transmit the impulse away from the cell body. Okay, to the next neuron. Okay, so the next neuron is the interneuron. It is also called the intermediate neuron because it connects these two together, the afferent neuron and the efferent neuron. Okay, it connects the afferent neuron to the efferent neuron. So it's called interneuron. Right. So the interneuron is a bit shorter. It's found in the spinal cord and the brain. It's not connected to receptors or effectors directly. So this interneuron also has dendrites and dendrons, which transmit the impulses towards the cell body, and it has axon, which transmits the impulses away from the cell body to the next neuron, which is the efferent neuron. Okay, so it looks somewhat like a star shape. And there's another type of interneuron, which is where the cell body is right in the center, and it has two parts here. But never mind, we just study this type. Okay, so this is the interneuron. It's much shorter than these two other neurons. So recognize the structure of the three neurons. You have to be able to identify them and differentiate between them, their structures. Let us look at a diagram of the spinal cord as seen from the top, like this person. You're looking at the spinal cord from the top, and this is the cross section of the spinal cord. The spinal cord is located in the vertebral column of the backbone, inside the neural canal. Okay, so this is a cross section of the spinal cord, this one, and the spinal cord has two roots or two projections sticking out where the neurons are found. And then these two roots will combine to form the spinal nerves. Okay, we'll discuss all this in the next video. So for a person, if you are looking from the top here, now this part is the front, right? If you look at it at the person from here, this direction, it's called the ventral view, this direction. And this direction is the dorsal view. You're looking at the back of the person, where the vertebral column is located. Okay, so that's why we call this root of the spinal cord the dorsal root, and this root of projection is the ventral root. Okay, now let's look at the position of the 3 neurons. So this is the efferent neuron that is connected to receptors, and its own nerve endings or the own projections here may form the receptors also for pain. So from the receptor, the impulse will travel to the spinal cord, all right? And the cell body, which is represented by this circle with a dot, to simplify the diagram of the cell body. Okay, the cell body of efferent neuron is located in the dorsal root. There'll be a group of it together, so it'll form a bulge, a swelling, which we call ganglion. Not ganglion, not a gang of lions like that. Ganglion. Ganglion is a swelling on the dorsal root, which contains the cell bodies of efferent neurons. They are grouped here because they are not at the ends of the cell, they're at the sides, so you have to put them somewhere, and they are grouped together in the dorsal root, in the structure called the ganglion. So we know this is the dorsal root when we see a swelling, because the ganglion is always in the dorsal root, not the ventral root. Okay, ventral root got no ganglion for the spinal cord. Now then, if you look at the second neuron, is interneuron, which is shorter, and then this is the efferent neuron. Again, you have the cell body. Dendrons are not shown here because they are very short, and this long thing is the axon of the efferent neuron. Okay, so back to the efferent neuron, where is the axon and the dendron? Dendron brings the impulses towards the cell body, so this is the dendron, and it is long. Okay, it's from the receptors in the sensory organs to the dorsal root, near to the spinal cord. So this dendron is very long. It brings the impulse in here, and from the cell body onwards is the axon. This is the axon, so it has a short axon. So efferent neuron has long dendron and then short axon that transmits the impulses away from the cell body. Okay, then you have interneuron. It has some short dendrites and dendrons here, and short axon. Both the dendron and axon are short. For efferent neuron, the dendrons are also at the cell body on top here. Also cannot be drawn because they're too tiny. So short dendrons. There's short dendrons, but a very long axon. Okay, sometimes a few feet long, because it depends on where the muscle is. If the muscle is in the leg, then the axon here has to be very long to transmit impulses from the spinal cord right down to the lower parts, to the leg, the lower parts of the leg. Okay, so the conclusion is efferent neuron has long dendron, short axon. Interneuron has both short axon and short dendron. Efferent neuron has short dendron but long axon. Let's compare the 3 neurons now, and this type of question may come out for the SPM or for your exams. It's a popular question for structured and essay questions. Okay, from the aspect of function, the efferent neuron transmits nerve impulses from receptor to the brain and spinal cord, or to the central nervous system. Interneuron is the middleman between the two, So it'll link the afferent neuron to the efferent neuron. It transmits nerve impulses from the afferent neuron to the efferent neuron. Now the efferent neuron then is the third neuron, which transmits nerve impulses from the brain and spinal cord, the central nervous system, to the effectors, the glands and muscle. Okay, then from the aspect of dendron, afferent neuron has one long dendron here, right? And it's only one. But the interneuron has many short dendrons here. But another type has only one dendron. So we just write has short dendron. Enough. Okay. Now the efferent neuron, there's only one type of efferent neuron. It has short dendrons here. So many short dendrons. This one is the axon. Okay, so the dendron is short, the axon is long. But from the aspect of axon, afferent neuron has short axon. Long dendron, but short axon. So this part is the axon, is shorter. For the interneuron, the dendron and axon are both short. Okay, it's a shorter cell than both the afferent or efferent neuron. It's shorter. Now for efferent neuron, the axon is long. It's this one. That extends from the spinal cord down to the effectors. Okay, the axon. So we have to memorize the differences in terms of the structure is the dendron and the axon. You are asked to give the differences. Afferent neuron has long dendron, short axon. Efferent neuron has short dendron, long axon. Okay, so just remember one, like long dendron, then you'll know the rest. Okay, that and what is true for the afferent neuron is just the opposite for the efferent neuron in terms of the dendron and axon. Now let's discuss the fourth aspect, which is the position of the cell body in the neuron. Okay, inside the neuron, where's the cell body? For afferent neuron, the cell body is at the side of the neuron. See, it's at the side. It's not at this end, A or end B. It's at the side. Now for the interneuron, the cell body is at the end of the neuron here. This is the other end of the neuron where the axon terminals are. So it's at the front end of the neuron. And some interneurons look quite like the efferent neuron, but a much shorter version. It's shorter. The interneuron is shorter than the other two neurons. And it is found in the spinal cord and the brain. Alright, the brain is actually made up of 100 billion neurons, interneurons. Okay, mainly interneurons. So the cell body is at the end, or it may be in the center of the neuron. So this is another type of interneuron that's also shown in the textbook, right? So in this type of neuron, the cell body is right in the center here. Okay, and if the transmission of impulse is this way, then this is the dendron, and this is the axon. Okay, so learn to recognize the three types of neurons. Interneuron is always shorter than the other two neurons. For efferent neuron, the cell body is at the end of the neuron, the front end of the neuron, and this is the other end. The axon terminals is on the other end. Okay, location of cell body in the nervous system. Now this one will be shown in the last slide. It's in the ganglion of the dorsal root for afferent neuron. Ganglion of dorsal root of spinal nerve. I'll show you in a minute. And for interneuron, it's in the gray matter of the spinal cord. And for efferent neuron, the cell body is also in the gray matter of the spinal cord. All these are talking about where the cell body is. Okay, so let's look at the next slide to find out the position or location of the cell body in the nervous system, all the cell bodies. Let's refer back to the drawing of the spinal cord, the cross-section of the spinal cord. Now, where are the cell bodies of the three neurons in the nervous system? Now we're going to talk about the cell bodies. For afferent neuron, the cell body is in the ganglion, which is a swelling in the dorsal root, but not in the spinal cord. This is the root of the spinal cord. For the interneuron, the cell body is in the gray matter of the spinal cord, And same too for the cell body of efferent neuron, is in the gray matter. So what is the gray matter? The gray matter is a part of the central nervous system of the spinal cord in the brain, which contains a lot of these cell bodies. That's why it's gray, because the cell bodies that contain the cytoplasm and nucleus are grayish color when you group them together. Whereas the white matter, what is the white matter? The white matter is the part of the nervous system that contains a lot of these axons that have the myelin sheath. The myelin sheath has fatty substance and that is whitish or white in color. Okay, so if the axon has myelin sheath, then it will be white in color, and this causes or forms the white matter, okay, surrounding the gray matter here. So gray matter contains the cell bodies of the interneuron and the efferent neuron, okay, whereas the white matter contains the axons with the whitish myelin sheaths. So this part is white also. Let us try this question that is a forecast question for the exam. The diagram shows two cells, Y and Z. Compare and contrast the two cells. So we have to give the similarities and differences when we make a comparison. Okay. Now for similarities, first of all, identify cell Y and Z. So cell Y is what type of cell? Yes, it is an afferent neuron, and Z is an efferent neuron. Both cells have the three parts, the three general parts. What are they? Cell body, dendrons, and axons. Number 3, both cells transmit nerve impulses. Number 4, both cells transmit nerve impulses in only how many directions? One direction. Okay, the 5th point, both cells help in what process of the body's activities? Coordination. Lastly, write down the differences, and you can tabulate the differences and make a table for it to show the differences. So write for the title Y bracket afferent neuron, and this one is Z bracket efferent neuron. So refer to the cells as Y and Z according to the question. Now number 1, it transmits impulses from receptors to the central nervous system. That is for Y. For Z, it transmits impulses from the central nervous system to the effectors. Secondly, Y. For Y, its cell body is located in the ganglia in the dorsal root of the spinal cord. So it's in a swelling in the dorsal root, but not in the spinal cord. It's just in the dorsal root, in the swelling called the ganglia. For Z, the cell body is located in the gray matter right inside the spinal cord. Y, for Y, its cell body is at the side of the cell. Okay, not at either ends of the cell, but at the side. For Z, its cell body is at the front end of the cell. For Y, it has a long dendron. For Z, it has many short dendrons. And conversely, Y has short axon and Z has long axon. So Y is connected to receptors in the sensory organs. Okay, so it will be able to transmit impulse from receptors to the central nervous system. That's the function of Y. But for Z, it is connected to effectors such as muscles and glands. So that ends the lesson for this video, and please jot down the answers and make it like an exercise, so as you write you will remember better too. Okay, and you can collect a series of exercises that you can refer to for revision before the exam. Okay, so thanks for viewing, and please share, like, and subscribe. And I will be putting up the next video very soon on the spinal cord, so have a look at that too. right? And after that we will go very faster, we'll go faster into hormones and also the other parts of chapter 3.